Our top focus on WION at this hour. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who was captured by U.S. forces in Caracas, arrived at a military base in the U.S. on Saturday evening. The left-wing leader was captured after months of threats and pressure tactics by President Donald Trump in a swift but audacious military operation. Maduro was seen surrounded by FBI agents as he descended the boarding stairs of a U.S. government plane at a New York State National Guard facility and was slowly escorted along the tarmac. Vehicles which were possibly transporting Maduro were filmed leaving the heliport. A helicopter that may have been carrying Venezuelan president was later seen over Manhattan. According to reports, Maduro will be transferred to the Metropolitan Detention Center in the Sunset Park neighborhood of Brooklyn. Maduro and his wife, seized overnight from their home on a military base, were first taken aboard a U.S. warship on their way to face prosecution for a Justice Department indictment, accusing them of participating in a narco-terrorism conspiracy. Following the military action, Trump said that the United States will run Venezuela with A group and will tap into its huge oil reserves. Trump said he was designating people from his cabinet to be in charge of Venezuela, but gave no details of how this would work.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
Well, Trump also indicated that U.S. troops could be deployed in Venezuela in the near future and said that Washington is not afraid of boots on the ground.
Well, you know, they always say boots on the ground. Oh, so we're not afraid of boots on the ground if we have to have. We had boots on the ground last night at a very high level, actually. We're not afraid of it. We don't mind saying it. But we're going to make sure that that country is run properly. We're not doing this in vain. This is a very dangerous attack. This is an attack that could have gone very, very badly.
The U.S. President also described the current state of the Latin American country and said that U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio had been in touch with Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, who has been sworn in as Maduro's successor. Trump touted that Rodriguez was essentially willing to work with Washington.
You have a vice president who's been appointed by Maduro, and right now she's the vice president, and she's, I guess, the president. She was sworn as president just a little while ago. She had a long conversation with Marco, and she said, we'll do whatever you need. I think she was quite gracious, but she really doesn't have a choice.
Now, contrary to Trump's statement, Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez demanded the immediate release of President Nicolas Maduro and First Lady Celia Flores. Rodriguez came live on state television alongside senior government and military officials. She said that the country's political and military leadership was unified and fully mobilized.
We demand the immediate release of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores, the only president of Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro. Here is the most important high command of the Venezuelan state, the military high command, the high command of the state, the high command of the Council of the Vice President. All factors are combined. Political factors of national power in Venezuela.
And for more on this, we're now being joined live by Peter Kuznick. He's a professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American University. Thank you so much, Professor Kuznick, for joining us on the broadcast.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Kuznick, Trump has said that now U.S. will run Venezuela until a safe, proper and judicial transition can take place. How do you think that will play out, given Trump's America First agenda?
Well, we see what a great job Donald Trump is doing of running the United States. He's destroying this country, so now he's going to do the same thing to another country. There's very little chance that this is going to turn out well. His own base is largely opposed to it. The international community is horrified. It not only goes against U.S. law, but it goes against all international law. So the United States was already being seen as a rogue regime, a pariah state. Now it's even going to be more so. I can't imagine this having a positive outcome inside Venezuela or inside the United States.
And having said that, Professor Kuznick, there have been pointed questions about the legality of the strikes and Maduro's subsequent arrest. How is Washington reacting to these latest developments? And we understand that the Congress was not informed of the decision. So in light of these revelations, is there any legal justification for the U.S. attack on Venezuela?
None whatsoever. There is no fig leaf of legality to what the United States is doing, but Trump prefers it that way. Trump doesn't want to be tainted with legality if he can show he's a strong man. And you look at that lineup of war criminals who are behind him today: Stephen Miller, Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio. They all would rather do something that outrages public opinion, and that's flagrantly unconstitutional, to show how strong they are. That's what this regime is about. We've seen regimes like that in other parts of the world. This idea that we are above the law, we don't care what you say, what protests you make, or what you try to do to stop us. We've got the power, and we're going to do as we want. The United States played that role in Latin America for many, many decades. You look at between 1898 and the Roosevelt administration in the 1930s, the U.S. intervened over and over again throughout Latin America, overthrew democratically elected governments, and replaced them with governments that were subservient to American military and business interests. And then we saw this again during the Reagan administration in El Salvador and Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic and Guatemala. And we saw it with the invasion of Panama in 1989 and the overthrow of Maduro. So it's not that this is something new, but it's still morally outrageous and completely against all international law.
What do you think is next for Venezuela, and essentially now who will fill this post-Maduro vacuum? Now they have said that Delcy Rodriguez is going to assume the presidency temporarily, but she has made it clear that Nicolas Maduro is going to be the only president, and she has defended him. What do you make of it?
Well, what's going to happen next is the U.S. is going to have to put soldiers into Venezuela, boots on the ground, and it says it's going to rebuild, at least the oil companies are going to rebuild the oil industry there. We know that Venezuela's got the largest oil reserves in the world, and the United States is now going to seize that oil. Trump made a big deal. He didn't talk about democracy. He didn't even talk about drugs today. He talked about oil. That's the way Trump thinks. He says they stole our oil. They didn't steal our oil. Like many countries, they nationalized their own oil. The U.S. did not own any of that. And now the U.S. wants to take that oil. They want to flood the market eventually and lower the price of oil in order to, number one, cut off Cuba and overthrow Cuba, but also to punish China, India, Russia, Iran. So it's part of the U.S. strategy, but they also are trying to cut off the ties between Latin America and other parts of the world. What Trump said in his national security strategy is that there's going to be the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. The U.S. is going to dominate, control, overthrow governments in Latin America, but also groups like the BRICS. You know, Latin America was a very important part of the BRICS, of the global South, of other Latin American and global development projects. So the U.S. is trying to destroy that right now. India is one of the countries that's likely to suffer, but it already has because of Trump's policies. But China is going to be the one that's hurt the most by the loss of oil, because China was Venezuela's main market for its oil.
Right, Professor Kuznick, and as you mentioned, the Venezuelan oil reserves, which have remained the major focus during the turmoil. And Trump said during the press conference that U.S. oil companies will rebuild the Venezuelan oil industry. Now, critics say that this whole exercise perhaps is Trump administration. It is for petrodollars. Would you agree to that?
It's a big part of it, certainly. Trump is not concerned that Maduro may have allegedly stolen the election, because Trump himself tried to steal the election in the United States in 2020. And all those people standing behind him today have said publicly that they believe that the election was stolen, even though every intelligent person in the world knows that the election was not stolen in 2020. Trump got his butt kicked, but he can't accept that. So you've got these people who are basically a lineup of war criminals who are someday going to be indicted in The Hague for what they're doing. I think it's important that the world now impose sanctions on the United States. The United States is eager to sanction Russia, China, anybody else who does things the United States doesn't like. Well, isn't it time for the rest of the world to stand up and say what the United States is doing is outrageous, it's illegal, it's immoral, and start to say we're not going to accept this? I hope that India takes a leading role in that, along with Russia and China and the global South, and that people to call out and oppose this kind of theft, really, and this kind of illegal kidnapping operation as an attempt at regime change.
Professor Kuznick, I'd like to get your thoughts on another development. Rubio yesterday said that President Trump is ready to talk with anybody but does not play games. And Rubio has also said that Maduro played games and Trump is a man of action as compared to Maduro, which is, like whom he has said, is a game player. Now, how should one read those lines here? And what message is essentially U.S. sending to its adversaries like Iran, which has recently been on the receiving end of the ire from United States?
Well, 2 points I'd like to make on that. Number one, little Marco, as Trump used to call him, it was the brains behind this operation. Pete Hegseth might be the face of it, but he didn't have the brains to actually plan this. But Rubio is obsessed with overthrowing left-wing governments throughout Latin America. He claimed that his family fled from Castro, when in reality, his parents left Cuba 3 years before Castro came to power. But his real goal in overthrowing Maduro is to cut off the flow of cheap oil that's been going to Cuba and keeping the Cuban government afloat. So Rubio is really the mastermind behind this operation. He's the one who's obsessed with it. That's the part of the world he cares about. The second point, I'm trying to remember what else you asked. Oh, about Iran. Yes, it clearly sends a message to Iran. Trump just met with Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago, and one of the things they discussed and have openly threatened is further attacks against Iran. I think that a lot of governments leaders are not sleeping well tonight because they know that the United States will not be constrained by international law or decency or justice or anything else at this point. Trump is a bully and will use whatever force he can to get what he wants. And we'll have to see what's next. Petro in Colombia, certainly Ortega in Nicaragua, the government in Cuba. There are a lot of governments right now that could be in the crosshairs, could be the next to suffer at the hands of the United States. But in the long run, the Venezuelan people are almost certainly going to resist, and the United States is get tied down in the same kind of forever war that the United States has been so averse to in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya and probably Syria. You know, the world needs to find a different way to settle these disputes peacefully through diplomacy, and hopefully we're going to learn some lessons from this.
Right, of course, Dr. Peter Gusnik, we'll have to wait and see how the situation develops. But for now, thank you so much for joining us in the broadcast and sharing your valuable perspective with us.
Thank you.